Final Fantasy XIV, at least to me, isn't just another MMO. Aside from the meme, it is still one of the most critically acclaimed, player-beloved games in the genre's history. Now, let's just address something here. I'm not ignoring the elephant in the room. Dawn Trail absolutely brought the game some of the most negative feedback it's had since the 1.0 days. Some players rightly feel like the story pacing just dipped off, others have certain issues with various different design flaws and choices, but here's the thing, criticism does not make it a bad game. In fact, far from it. If you are a new player considering Final Fantasy XIV, or even a veteran player just looking to reignite the flame a little bit, even with the game's recent stumbles, Final Fantasy XIV still does a lot exceptionally well. That's why in today's video I figured we would bring some positivity and dive into the 5 things that I feel Final Fantasy XIV actually does really, really well. I want to take a look at the core strengths that keep players like myself coming back year after year, week after week, day after day. As truly and genuinely as unbiased as I physically can be, I do truly believe that Final Fantasy XIV is an incredible game. And you know, it can't all be negative all the time. So let's try and bring the tone up a little bit. So first on the list, we have to talk about the storytelling of the game. Most MMOs truly treat their story like background noise. You kind of click through quest text, you're sort of vaguely aware that there's an evil somewhere, a boss, a prince of darkness you need to kill. You know, you go and save the princess and then you're back to grinding, who cares? Well, ffxiv kind of flips the formula here, and Jesse Cox, a big Final Fantasy XIV creator, actually probably said it best himself. He said that the game presents itself as an RPG first and an MMO second, which kind of sounds scary on paper, but trust me, there's some merit here and there's definitely method behind the madness. 14's storytelling, I personally feel, is really, really enjoyable. For the moments that are stand out and really need emphasis on, there is full voice acting in most parts. There's a big focus on cinematic breaks and camera work as the story's being played out between the characters, and of course you've got to bear in mind here, you are playing as a voiceless protagonist, so the game has to work with your character and its own emotes to kind of portray how you're feeling in the game, and I feel like for what they've got, it does that quite well too. The music, at least to me, never really feels off pace. It always feels on brand for the moment, whether it's really sad, really upbeat, or really intense for battle scenes. When it comes to expansions, each and every one of them, at least to me, feels like their own standalone Final Fantasy game, their own adventure, if you like. If you're familiar with the Final Fantasy franchise, you'll know that a lot of them have nods to each other, but aren't directly linked a lot of the time, and that's kind of similar to 14. Albeit 14 is a little bit more interlinked, but typically most expansions have completely distinct themes, emotional arcs, character development, and really, really satisfying conclusions. You see, I personally feel like the writing team does one thing in particular really well with 14, and that's working on the payoffs. There are quite often things that you did hours ago, even sometimes weeks ago in the story, that will come back in a way and rear its head and leave you thinking, wow, I didn't really expect that to pan out that way, or I didn't expect that character to be involved, and it is really rewarding. For example, some side characters in the game that you might think have absolutely no relevance or no means to even be in the situation they're in can sometimes become the real focus of heartache, the real focus of tear-jerking moments. Above all else, in the storytelling of 14, I really enjoy the pacing that it takes. It's not afraid to slow down when it needs to slow down and pick up where it needs to pick up. Now, of course, there are moments which are perhaps slower than most people would like them to be, but I personally feel like the game really understands what it needs in that moment and isn't afraid to be unconventional. This doesn't just relate to the MSQ. There are many side quests that actually have real impact to them, fully fleshed out storylines, some are even voice acted. Many of the jobs, the classes that you play in the game, in fact, if not all of them, have fully customized dialogue, storylines, plot points, characters. It's all really impressive. As I mentioned at the start, Dawn Trail of course didn't land perfectly for everyone, and that needs to be addressed. However, I do just want to end this segment on a note that 14's storytelling is still more ambitious, heartfelt, and in my opinion more cohesive than a vast majority of MMO narratives out there. Sometimes as 14 players, when you're surrounded by the game for so long and you take things for granted, you kind of forget how bad things are on the other side of the pond. Next up, we need to talk about the job system, being able to play every class without directly having to roll an alt. Now, I have spoken about this in other videos before, how yes, whilst you can still play every job. You can't necessarily main every job well because one, you don't have the time, and two, it would be impossible to get the gear. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you can absolutely play every single class on one character. Other MMOs will often make you pick a class and stick to it, which means that if you play the class up until level 40 and you really hate it, you're having to re-roll. You can't just change once you've got invested with your character, maybe the story arc behind your character. Unfortunately, you have to break ties of it and roll again, whereas in 14, you don't. Essentially, in 14, you are the alt character. Every combat job, every crafting and gathering profession, they're all on one convenient character. And it's super easy to switch just with the click of a button. You can even save a lot of your presets for your gear. So everything is good to go. I feel like for me in most MMOs, this is what I suffer with a lot of the time. I tend to play up until level 60 or 70, grinding out one character, leveling up, really enjoying it, and then I hit a wall where I'm just like, damn, I'd really like to just play something else or try something else. And in 14, I just change. I've been playing a lot of Reaper recently. My Reaper hit 100, but I didn't want to do the endgame grind just yet, so I switched up and now I'm playing a monk, and nothing has changed for me except the fact that I'm running lower end dungeons with a completely different toolkit. Of course, this does mean that you're going to have to then level all of these jobs up, but to be honest, you're playing an MMO. Like, what do you expect? It's not that bad though. Once you get a certain job to 100 or max level or even a higher level than some of your other jobs, you will get XP boosts. You can run things like roulettes, you'll get rested XP, and before you know it, you'll pick up the pacing fairly easily. Let's move on now and talk about the community of the game, because I really do feel that despite some opinions, the community is a huge accolade to the likes of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, don't get me wrong, there are going to be a small subset, pockets of people that just are toxic. You're going to get that in any game you play, whether it's online, whether it's offline. Some people just hate being happy. Personally, for me, I find that in a lot of online games, the community is just something that you just have to deal with. Like, if you just want to play the game, you deal with people, you appreciate you're playing an MMO, this is not your experience anymore. But in 14, I feel like I find myself logging in and interacting with a lot more people playing this game than I would do many others. I've always absolutely admired, from the moment that I started playing 14, I've admired the sheer patience and support from veteran players to newer players, especially when going through things like dungeons and experiencing the MSQ for the first time. I can't tell you how many times in games like WoW or ESO that I've been trying to chat to an NPC and my whole party has just left me, cleared half the dungeon before I've even had chance to read the quest text. It's not cool, it doesn't really leave a good impression, but in 14, people wait. 9 times out of 10, people will wait. They understand what it's like, they've been there, they've absorbed the story, and they know there's a lot of cool things coming. They don't want to ruin that experience. I personally believe one of the major reasons for the patience in general is the fact that 14 really kind of indicates who is new, very obviously, in the form of its sprouts. People are aware of the people that they need to perhaps shed a bit more time for. People are aware that they won't know their rotations right off the bat. They won't know every mechanic straight away, and that's fine. Everyone has to be new once. I feel like in a lot of MMOs, they really sell the community as being this huge accolade they've managed to achieve, when actually when you join the game, it's absolutely horrendous. Well, 14, to me at least, really isn't like that. It really does feel like the community has been built into the game at a fundamental level. I also personally feel like the absence of any official stat trackers or DPS meters really helps with the community building. A lot of the main issues I found in WoW is people constantly checking in on who's doing the most damage, who's not doing enough damage, and then ramping up their toxicity off the back of that. Many of the game's roulettes, which are like daily instances that you'll do, actually pair up veterans and newcomers to ensure that both sides of the community are engaging with each other. There are also rewards that correspond to both sides, whether it be experience, whether it be commendations, or currency. The game even has a mentor system which encourages experienced players to guide other more newer players through their first dungeons and trials, and although it's become a little bit of a meme, I feel like the good intentions are still definitely there. Now, of course, as I said, not every interaction is perfect, but it is telling that one of the most common pieces of advice given to newer players is don't be afraid to ask for help. People will respond. The community will help you, and that is really true. There are many community-driven events, for example, like we have the Moonfire Fair right now, where everyone just hangs out, gets involved. There are player-run concerts, many RP events, and of course, not forgetting the fashion events that you can take part in. And also, let's not forget the pinnacle of the socialization in 14, and if you're brave enough, you can join a free company. You can even join a static where you can go ahead and take on some of the harder content in the game and truly flesh out those relationships. In at number 4 is the fact that I love that 14 really embraces the Final Fantasy legacy, and whilst that is of course incredibly biased to a Final Fantasy game, I do feel it is still an accolade of 14 in general. You see, 14 doesn't shy away from its roots, it really embraces them, and in fact I would argue that it actually celebrates them. From the very start of the game, you'll find nods to previous entries in everything from location names to boss mechanics to NPCs. For example, in terms of instance content, you've got like the Crystal Tower raid series, which is a direct take from Final Fantasy III, not forgetting the Omega raids that will pit you against iconic enemies like XIV and Kefka. We even have the Gold Saucer that you can go and visit, which I'm not afraid to say I spend a lot of time in. I do feel with the many Final Fantasy references, it's not just nostalgia for the sake of it. These references are woven into Eorzea's history in a way that truly feels organic. It isn't just the NPCs and boss fights that throw back to Final Fantasy of old, it's also the incredible music that's composed for the franchise. Many boss themes, dungeon tracks, and general ambient tracks will be shown here, many of which, if you know them, will put a smile on your face straight away. For example, when I first heard the ambient music for the Eden raid series, I was blown away. To me, at the very least, it's a constant reminder that I'm not just playing an MMO. This is still very much a Final Fantasy game. Last but not least, we have to talk about the end game variety, as in my opinion, this game has a lot. When you traditionally hit max level in a lot of MMOs, you are staring down pretty much one path, and that is just grinding better gear for the sake of grinding better gear for then it to change the next patch. And whilst the gearing does change with most patches in 14, that's not the only thing to look at. Now, of course, for the hardcore of you out there is absolutely endgame raiding in the form of Savage, Ultimate, Extremes. Some of these challenges can take a few hours to clear, some a couple of days, and in the form of Ultimate, some of them can take weeks, if not months. In fact, considering I'm not that much of a hardcore person myself, one of my favourite things to do in the game is watch the race to world first, which I personally feel is some of the most endearing content in the space. If you're into more laid-back content, then you've got the likes of the housing system, which will pretty much let you decorate to your heart's content, providing you can get a house in the first place. You can pretty much make anything from cozy tea rooms all the way to nightclubs, just depending on how brave you are. Crafting and gathering is a huge focus in 14, each having their own deep progression, gear, and special events for. If you're more of a collector like I am, then you can chase the many hundreds of mounts, minions, titles, and glamour pieces. We referenced the Gold Saucer earlier, in which you can take on triple triad matches, Lord of the Minion challenges, and you can even do chocobo racing, and let's face it, who doesn't want to do chocobo racing? There's fishing to do, treasure maps to complete, deep dungeons, which are like roguelikes where you start from level 1, working your way down randomly generated rooms, typically with the enemies getting harder and harder and the rewards getting more and more every single time, which you can do solo or with a party. These deep dungeons alone kind of house like a bit of a subset of the community on their own. There are many people that will enter these dungeons on their own with the sole intention of clearing it solo, which is insane. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that 14 recognizes that not everyone wants the same end game. Not everyone wants the same thing. It essentially lays out your options for you and allows you to pick what's going to make you happy. So from the game's heartfelt storytelling to its flexibility and its community spirit, these are the reasons that I personally really enjoy Final Fantasy XIV, not just as a game, but also as an MMO. The game isn't flawless, it's not perfect, but it does get so many things right that make it hard to put down. So with that, I pose this question to you guys, whoever's watching. If you play Final Fantasy XIV, what is the one thing that you feel this game does better than any other game? Leave your answers down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.